Hello and welcome to Try Talking Sport, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and a little bit of entertainment. Well, what a weekend of racing. Finally! It was great to see the action underway at the Ironman events in Estonia, Poland and France, as well as on the ITU circuit with the World Championships in Hamburg. The Tour de France has been thrilling to watch, and of course closer to home here in Ireland, the Kerry Way Ultramarathon took place last weekend, and the Transatlantic Way Ultra Cycling Race is currently underway with riders en route to the finish line in Kinsale. The National Aquathon Championships at the weekend also saw some very exciting racing and super results, with Kieran Jackson and Emma Porter crowned the first national champions of 2020. Lots of our former guests have been in action since our last episode. It really does feel like a bit of normality is returning with all of this racing underway. I am chomping at the bit to get my hands on a microphone and get back to work. Special mentions this week to Katrina Matthews and Nikki Bartlett, both recording significant wins over the weekend. Katrina taking her first win as a pro athlete at the Ironman 70.3 Estonia on Saturday, and Nikki winning her race and setting a new course record in the process. Cyclist Ronan McLaughlin set a new course record at the Donegal Ultra 555, winning the race in a blistering time of 17 hours, 17 minutes. Brian McChrystal and Donncha McCarthy took the Paratri Aquathon Championship title with Leo Hines and Stephen Teeling Lynch in second place. The hardman in Kerry saw Brian McChrystal set a new course record for the long distance event in Killarney as he stormed to victory on the day. You can check out my live chat with Brian and his hardman a race recap over on the Try Talking Sport Facebook page, and indeed find out the stories behind the athletes in our previous podcast episodes. In other news, Frank Greeley started his Gratitude Road Challenge on Monday of this week, walking from his hometown of Ballyhaunis in Mayo to Morton Stadium in Dublin over the next 2 weeks to raise funds for the Coombe Hospital. Frank set a junior 10,000 metre national outdoor running record 50 years ago, and that record still stands today. His Gratitude Road journey is part of his anniversary celebrations. On a personal level, I finally completed my August swim challenge for Cancer Care West. With an initial target of swimming 13 kilometres for the Galway Bay Virtual Swim, I rounded off the month of August with 13.1 miles of swimming in the sea in Skins. I had hoped to get to 26k, but a few unexpected roadblocks got in the way, which was a bit disappointing, but nevertheless, I am still very happy to have clocked up those miles. Not bad for a non-swimmer. Now the focus is back on the bike and run, with some daily dips in the sea to keep me on my toes. This week's guest really doesn't need any introduction. The three-time Ironman World Champion Mirinda Carfrae is one of the best and most notable triathletes in the world. Rinny, as she is known, completed her first Ironman race in Kona in 2009, where she finished in second place. In 2010, she was crowned the World Champion for the first time, and since then she has been crowned the Ironman World Champion twice more in both 2013 and 2014. Rinny has finished on the podium 7 times in Kona since that first appearance in 2009, with 3 world titles, 2 second places and 1 third place. Her run course record on the Big Island, set in 2014, still stands to date. Testament to the determination, tenacity, power and sheer grit it took to literally run herself to the top of the podium and claim that victory on the day. Her sporting CV is a lengthy one. Some highlights of her success include representing Australia at the ITU Triathlon World Championships from 2001 to 2005, earning silver medals in 2002 and 2003 before stepping up to long distance racing. She won the Nice Long Course Triathlon in 2004, was second at the ITU Long Course World Championships in 2005, finished third at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships in 2006 before claiming the world title at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships in 2007. To date, Rinny has clocked up over 50 wins at major races throughout the world. Married to fellow world champion triathlete Timothy O'Donnell, they welcomed Izzy to the family 3 years ago and are expecting baby number 2 at the very end of this year. They, along with Izzy, announced this news on the Tim and Rinny show, much to the delight of their followers, and were also appointed global brand ambassadors for Aquasphere in recent weeks. Despite the lack of races now taking place due to COVID-19 and the global pandemic, Rinny is as focused as ever. We shoot the breeze in this episode chatting about her career in sport, juggling training, racing and motherhood, all while tenaciously and passionately chasing her dreams and goals. Enjoy the show. Rinny, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's 8:30 in Boulder. It's 3:30 in the afternoon in Galway, and it looks like the sun is shining.
Yes, the sun is shining here, although we've had some pretty bad fires locally and some bad wind yesterday, so it's a little grey and smoky, high 30s, and then snow tomorrow.
Oh, so it's a big mix.
Freak snowstorm tomorrow, which will actually be great for for hopefully put out some fires. But pretty weird for this time of year, pretty early for snow and freezing weather. For one day, I think then it goes back to spring weather.
You had some big news announced very, very recently. One is that you are pregnant with a brother or sister for Izzy, and the second is that you're now a global ambassador for Aquasphere. How far along are you with the pregnancy?
I'm actually 23 and a half weeks now, so well on our way, past halfway now. So it's actually gone pretty quickly, even in these crazy COVID times.
So what's it been like the last few weeks for you then, being pregnant and trying to train and I suppose navigate through COVID-19?
Yeah, well, rewind to March the end of March when we're training and I was trying to get ready for Ironman St. George. My first race of the year was going to be Texas 70.3. And I think 3 weeks out or 3.5 weeks out, that race got cancelled. And then within a week, St. George got cancelled. And so, Tim, things were looking a little grim on the racing front. And Tim and I kind of looked at each other and said, well, we were planning on starting, trying for another baby at some point this year, most likely after Kona, depending on how St. George went. So, why wait? Maybe we should start trying now. We're not getting any younger and, you don't know how long it's going to take to actually conceive. And so we started to try and 2 weeks later we were pregnant. So it happened very quickly. We're so fortunate that it did. We're over the moon, excited to have another little one on the way, a little sibling for Izzy to play with. And it's kind of shifted our whole year because, things were kind of grim and no races. And, as it's turned out, no races will happen. Maybe there'll be a race or two at the end of the year, but races have just continually been cancelled throughout this year. I mean, St. George was postponed until September and obviously that got cancelled. And so for me, timing could not have been better. It's really put a positive spin on this year. And in terms of training in the last weeks, initially I said to my coach, Julie Dibbins, no, I'll just keep pushing through and train and, hope that a race pops up. And then I fell pregnant and I said, okay, well, let's change that plan. I'll continue, we want to keep my fitness for as long as possible with hopes that, when I'm really slowing down at the end of my pregnancy, it's not, months and months of limited training. It's only a couple of months of really limited training. So I've been trying to keep active within reason, listening to my body, being smart. I'm probably only doing about 12 hours a week right now. And once the baby comes, obviously I'll have probably six to 8 weeks off and then get back into it. But again, the baby's due New Year's Eve. So hopefully be back racing by June, July.
And you are planning to be at the start line in Kona in 2021?
Yes, I've been given an early entry into that race. Kona got cancelled as well and it got postponed to February, as we all know. And so I was given an entry to the February race, and obviously I had to decline that due to pregnancy. And then, they canceled that one. And so they gave me I think everyone that got an entry for February, they gave it to them in October. So that couldn't have been more perfect for us because, again, starting racing in June would have been a very short lead in to try and do an Ironman to qualify and then do Kona. So Kona would have been off the cards for me next year. So cards have fallen into place. Hopefully we do get to race next year and there is a normal season for us. But the way things are unfolding, I won't be missing anything on the race front.
And it must have been difficult, Rinny, with the cancellation of all the races. I mean, your whole career depends on having races to be able to perform, to win at, to train for. So how did you and Tim deal with that at the time when the races started being cancelled?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really weird grieving period for everyone. It felt surreal that I mean, not only the race run, like the world was shutting down, and this dangerous virus was about, and we're all told to stay at home and not go out unless it was absolutely necessary. So dealing with all of that and comprehending that whole situation, but then just kind of like, I feel like there was almost a grieving process in that, we all sort of finish the season, you have your break, and then you have all these hopes and dreams for the next year and plan around it and meticulously plan around how you're going to prepare for the following year and how you're going to do better and what you're going to do differently. And so, we were well into that process. We started training in December. It's March. So we're 4 months in. We're in very good shape. And then sort of the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. A melancholy feel in our group. But then, obviously very quickly we fell pregnant. And so we had that to focus on. And then also our coach, Julie, put us on a 3-week on 1 week off cycle, which also was really good mentally to be like, okay, we're going to be in training and focus for 3 weeks. And then we'll have 1 week of basically do whatever you want. And we have been choosing to travel a little bit around Colorado and see some of our states. I mean, the years for us, since Tim and I have been together, 2009, which is when I started racing Kona. So our whole years have been centered around Kona, and also obviously racing in the summer. And so we've just been nonstop for 10 years. Yeah, it's been really nice to just be home and spend more time at our house and see some more of the Rocky Mountains, which is it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So we're definitely taking the positives from this time, and we have a lot to look forward to still.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your background in the sport, Rinny, if I can bring you right back to before your very first Kona, to right back like when you were a kid. Were you really sporty? I know you played basketball, but was it something that you grew up with, being really sporty in your family in Australia?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and I had 5 other siblings, 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and so we were just outside a lot, just like no shoes, running around the farm. We were grubs, really, and it was a great childhood in that it couldn't have been better in that we had room to run and play, and I think that is so important and so key. And, eventually I got put into organized sports, and that for me was basketball. I followed my brothers into the sport and just loved playing and competing. And initially I just kind of did it for fun. I'm like, I love basketball, I love playing for fun. I didn't understand that you could do it professionally until I was probably 14. And I was on like this, the representative team for Brisbane. And our coach took us to watch one of the WNBL games, which is the National League in Australia. And I met one of the professional basketball players, and I'm like, oh, you can do this for a living? And so that sort of all of a sudden shifted my focus to okay, that's what I want to do in life. I want to be a professional basketball player. I want to play in the WNBA. I want to go to college in the US and play. And then I didn't grow past 5'3", and so that dream kind of petered off a little. But when I finished high school, that's when I found triathlon. I was actually in the gym trying to get strong and fit for the upcoming basketball season, because at that point I was playing, in the open league with women that were much older than me, much stronger than me, and much bigger than me. And so in order to stand out, I needed to be the fittest and the strongest for my size and fastest on the court. But I met these triathletes, and I was just intrigued. You guys do 3 sports? That sounds crazy. That sounds so hard. But then, over weeks or over months, I became more intrigued with the training that they did. And then one day their coach, I started to do some running sessions as well with them. So I was just lifting and running, I think 5 days a week, lifting 3 days and running just 2 of their run sessions. And he just said, hey, you run really well. Have you ever thought about, giving triathlon a go? And that was all I needed. Just, that little bit of confidence to say, hey, you should give the sport a try. And it was a little while later before I could afford, to get a bike. But yeah, I was basically, okay, I'm going to be a triathlete from that moment forward. And that was back in, probably early 99 by that point, or late 98. And I did my first race the end of 99. So, it's been a lot. I've been in the sport a while now.
Where was that first race then? And how did you do?
The first race was just north of Brisbane in the Bay. And I actually did really well. I placed 3rd overall. Obviously, it was a very low-key local race, so no superstars on the start line. But, I was, during the race, I was I think it was, a 300-meter swim, 10K bike, 5K run, or 3K run. It was pretty short. And during the race, I was just thinking, this is miserable. This is so hard. You feel like you're drowning in the swim. I mean, obviously, I wasn't a swimmer, so the swimming was a real challenge for me. And then I think we had to like kind of run up the beach and upstairs to get to transition, and just feeling like my heart was going to explode after swimming and then running and then trying to hop on the bike and ride, and then hopping off the bike and having those dead heavy legs that we're all so familiar with. Like, well, this is just misery. This is just like, painful all day. But I crossed the finish line in third, and then, the competitive spirit sort of took over, and I'm like, okay, I can do better next time. And yeah, sure enough, I went home and trained more. And by 2001, I was on the Australian junior team. So that was pretty incredible for me, playing basketball for, 11 years. And the best I'd done was, get in the state team, but sit on the bench really when we went away and played. So to be representing my country and traveling internationally for the first time ever, that was just massive for me, and kind of a little bit of a sign that, okay, maybe this is a sport that you could excel at.
Do you ever look back now and think, God, you wanted to be a professional basketball player, but here you are, a professional triathlete and a 3 times world champion? I mean, there's some synergy there from a young child wanting to be the best in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that I just love sports. I love competition, and initially that love came in the form of playing basketball, and I still love the sport of basketball. I don't play anymore. I haven't played for over a decade. I think that certainly carried over into triathlon. And I look at my career now and I'm just like, I can't believe it. I have to kind of pinch myself that it's gone as well as I have. Triathlon really has given me everything I have. I met my husband through this sport. I live in the US. I never thought I'd be living in the US growing up. I have a little girl and another one on the way, and life could not have worked out better and sweeter. And 173 world title, 3 Ironman world titles, and multiple other wins around the world. I mean, it's incredible. And I'm constantly I feel blessed to have had these opportunities to race around the world and to follow my dreams.
You must meet some incredible people as well. You're an inspiration to an awful lot of people, but you must meet an awful lot of people along the way that inspire you to race and to train hard. And I'm sure that a lot of inspiration comes from Tim and from Izzy as well. Who inspires you now at the moment in terms of racing and training and just fuels that passion for sport and passion to be the best that you possibly can be?
I think I get a lot of motivation just from my family, as you mentioned, Izzy and Tim, and racing, really racing well, and being a good example for Isabel. She comes to every single one of our races, and she's there on the the start, the finish line, and on the sidelines, and she really gets it now. She's 3. But yeah, having that little cheerleader definitely gives you a little more fuel for the fire. But honestly, the competition and just the goal of racing Kona and being the best athlete you can be on that day, that really has driven me from the beginning of, when I found out about Kona, which was back in about 2003. Of course, didn't race it until about 2009. But once I learnt about Ironman and Kona and saw the videos, I'm like, that is what I want to do. I want to see if I can be the best athlete in the world in that event. And so just the pursuit of excellence on the Big Island is what motivates me.
So when did that pivot happen from short course racing up to long distance racing? What was the incentive, or I suppose the pivotal point that you decided, yes, I'm going to go and chase that long distance dream?
I think it was just a progression for me. I didn't grow up swimming. So swimming was, for ITU, it's very important to be a good swimmer. If you're behind how to swim, it's just a battle. And I've just got frustrated with ITU racing because it just seemed that the athletes that weren't as good on the swim weren't super great on the bike, or at least weren't, they were trying to get top 15, top 20. I'm like, no, I want to try and win. And so I was just constantly frustrated. Or there was only a few athletes around the world that I knew were similar type to me. They would drive to get to the front. They would work their butt off on the bike and have cohesion on the bike. And there were a few races where I was able to get, closer to the front and get a, top 5, top 3 finish. But that was so few and far between, and there was a lot of frustration. And also I noticed in training, I didn't seem to break down like my training partners. I could sort of run longer, further, and not have any injury issues, sick issues. And it seemed to just feel good. Running, felt like I could run all day at a pretty decent clip. And so it just, I guess I just kind of realized that I think my strength's going to lay in the longer distance races. And so, eventually I stepped up to 70.3s or halves, which turned into the 70.3 series. And then, but I had my eye on Ironman. I just believed that was, where I was going to excel.
And there is something magical about Kona and about stepping off the plane. We talk about it an awful lot, stepping off the plane in the airport. And the first thing that hits me is the heat when you step off the plane. But everything around it, it's like a mecca for athletes. But it's an amazing place.
Absolutely, yeah. You watch, I think it comes back to watching the NBC coverage and like hearing the stories and the meltdowns and the great athletes that have gone before you and done amazing things, or like gone before you and done amazing things and then the next year completely failed, and the mystery of trying to get it right on the Big Island. And yeah, exactly. I think, I'm Australian from Brisbane. The heat and humidity is not foreign to me. Our summers are much like Kona year round. But hopping off the plane, for me, I was coming from the US and it felt like a warm hug. I'm home. This is where, I belong. But yeah, definitely the heat and the intensity of it hits you first. And then, you just like, wow, I remember the first time I'm out on the Queen K, like this is where, dreams are made, and then running along Lee Drive and swimming at Dignity Beach and visualizing all of those things from the images you see, on the live coverage and also on the NBC coverage. And then actually being there is pretty incredible.
So you raced in Kona for the first time in 2009. That was your first time racing over there?
Yes, that was my first Ironman as well, actually. I was able to qualify through winning the 70.3 Worlds. And so that was my first Ironman, 2009 in Kona.
And you were on the podium in Kona in 2009 as well?
Yeah, I got second that year to Chrissy.
Took the win in 2010 and proceeded to do it 2 more times on the Big Island, as well as being on the podium 7 times over a decade. You've been on the podium in Kona.
That sounds about right, yeah.
It's incredible to think, really, isn't it, that you have been there so many times and you've excelled and done so well on so many occasions. And despite some of the times when you obviously had an issue with your elbow in 2019, you had that crash in 2015 where you were knocked off your bike. Like, it's amazing to think the grit and the tenacity that you have to go back to the island every single year, either as a defending champion or somebody that's trying to win it again. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I just love that race, and I think that comes across in my results, and it really is the race that lights my fire and gets me going. And I think because I love trying to see what I can do on the Big Island, I've been able to get the best out of myself on that island. And obviously I have a really great team around me, management, coach. I'm working with obviously Siri Lindley for a long time. Moved on to work with Julie Divins now, but I think it really starts. I mean, it starts with a passion and a dream, but then you build a really great team around you, and I certainly have a very positive team around me and have had throughout my career. And and then playing your whole season around that one race, it's a gamble, but it certainly paid off for me, having one big goal every year.
And what was it like running down the finish line as a world champion the first time?
It was kind of surreal. 2010, obviously, now, the defending champion, Chrissy Wellington, the morning of the race, pulled out. And I was, getting my bike set up, and it was kind of like 45 minutes before the race started. And I'd spent the whole year like, okay, Chrissy's the one I got to beat. This is what she's going to do. This is where she's going to be in the race. And then she was not going to be racing. And so I was like throwing for 6. I was kind of a bit out of it. And my coach just grabbed me and said, hey, this changes nothing. Race your race. You know what to do. You're fit. You're healthy. You're ready to go. Go do it. But I felt intense pressure because I'm like, well, I have to win now at the start. But then, the gun went off and I had the race of my life. I felt amazing. I had the best swim I've ever had on the island. I got out with like girls that are normally 2, 3, 4 minutes ahead of me in the main front pack, which has never happened before and never happened since. And then, I just was strong on the bike, and then I had a pretty fast marathon, and that win was a very special win. Yeah, and coming down the finish line, I think while you did expect it and you did dream it, and you and you go through the motions in your mind so many times. Doing it in reality, it was almost still surreal. And I feel like it wasn't until 13 that I ran down the finish line that I was really like able to take it in. But in 2010, I was just kind of like, whoa, like what just happened today? That was like a dream.
You do mention that 2013 is the day you had your perfect race.
Yeah, I think 2013 was my best race on the Big Island. I think I raced much better than I did in 2010. I raced very well in 2010. I had a great race for what I was capable of at that moment. But 3 years later, 2010 was my second ever Ironman. So I was still learning how to race an Ironman. By 2013, I felt that I could race an Ironman. I knew how to pace well on the bike, and then I knew how to close on the run. And I was in just great shape. We'd prepared very well. I'd done, everything right. No sickness, no injuries and that year. And yeah, got to the start line just ready to go. And then, yeah, it came together for me. So I feel like I executed very well.
You mentioned chasing on the run and executing a great run, but really 2014 is where that run really, we saw it come to the forefront, your technique, your style, your ability to just chase down your opponents. I'm not sure any of us thought in 2014 that you would make up the deficit behind Daniela, but what a performance you put in on that run, and your running record and your course record for the run still stands today 6 years later. Well, it'll be 7 years in 2021.
Yeah, 2014. I think mentally was my best performance. Being defending champion and getting off the bike 14 minutes or 13 and a half minutes or whatever it was, a long way. Down from the lead wasn't in my, our plan. But, the only person that believed that I could win after I got off the bike that day was Siri Lindley, my coach. I was hopped off the bike and I was kind of like angry that I'm like, this is embarrassing. I'm defending champion. I'm this far behind a rookie off the bike. Like, what's the point in even finishing? This is just a little bit of a negative mindset to start the run. And then, I saw Siri, half a mile in, and she was crouching down. She was like a crouching tiger, and her energy and intensity was palpable. And she's like, you are in the perfect position. And I'm like, you are crazy. And then, a few hundred meters later, I'm like, okay, let's just execute the perfect run. I know I looked after myself very well on the bike. These girls have to be hurting. They biked very hard. And changed my focus to just picking off one person at a time instead of being like, I'm 14 minutes down. Okay, let's just pick off one person at a time and see what happens. And that negativity that I had for, like a few minutes at the start of the run was basically forgotten. And it was just, okay, focus on the next person. And I think when you bring your focus into, smaller, achievable goals, then once I picked the girls off, I was becoming more and more positive and building energy, and then the fortunate thing for me was, I think I was in 8th. I'm like, my first goal was top 5. And so I got to, I think, 6th place. And then I think 3rd, 4th and 5th were running together. So I basically moved from 6th to 3rd in, a matter of 100 meters. And so the momentum that you gain from that is pretty incredible. And yeah, just focusing on, the next person was Rachel Joyce. And I was able to catch her down the energy lab. And then I'm like, wow, like I'm in 2nd place. This is an amazing race. But Daniela was just up the road and I could see her and I'm like, okay, that is my goal and I am going to catch her. And yeah, that was proud of that performance for holding it together. And, even though my mind and, the first few minutes of the run was a bit all over the place, I was able to get it back together and execute my best ever run on the Big Island.
Do you think, Rinny, that the mental strength and the mental capacity and turning that focus on in a race when you really need it is nearly more important than the amount of training that you've done to get to the start line of the race? Because if you had let those negative thoughts overtake you, you may never have gotten to that podium on the day.
I'm a believer that I'm not the most talented person on the Big Island by any means, but I think I've been able to get my best mental game for that race every year. And that's why I've been able to perform well. And yeah, I think it's really important to be very fit and strong because obviously if you don't do that and if you don't have a good nutrition plan in place, the mental game, isn't as successful. But if your mental game is there, you can push yourself further than, maybe you physically should be able to. And I feel that, yeah, I've definitely been able to rise to the occasion in Kona every year there, pretty much every year there. And I think that is the difference, because I've seen so many amazing athletes on the island, and I'm like, this girl is incredible. Like, I don't know how, I could beat her. But then, the gun goes off and weird things happen on that big island.
Madame Pele has a funny way of taking over the island on race day. There's been some really fast days, and then there's been some really slow days. And Madame Pele has been, part of the reason why people haven't, achieved their dreams or their goals on the day. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about how you balance life with Tim and with Izzy and your training and how you match it all together. But before I do that, I want to ask you, how did yourself and Tim meet, and where did he bring you on your first date?
Tim and I actually met I think we had met prior to this, but we properly met in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. Pre-race, there was a pasta party, and he came and sat, at the table I was sitting at. And so I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? And kind of casual meeting. And then the next day he won the men's race, and I actually finished second. I was defending champ, but I finished second in the women's race. And then, we just got to chatting after the race. And then, I called one of my good friends, Mary Miller, back here in Boulder. I was coming back to Boulder because I'd been in California with Siri training, and I was just coming back for the summer. It was around May. And I kind of waited until it got warm enough to come here. And I'm like, hey, do you know Tim O'Donnell? And she's like, yes, he just moved to Boulder. She's like, this is going to be a great summer. And so anyway, it was, I think, not until late June or July that we had our first date. The plan was to go to Red Rocks Amphitheatre, which is an outdoor amphitheatre. And at that time of the year, they have a movie on the rocks. And the movie was going to be The Princess Bride. And so he's like, okay, we're going to go see The Princess Bride. But he didn't get tickets in advance. And so he picks me up and he's like, okay, we'll go to Whole Foods. We'll get some, stuff for, dinner, because you kind of carry in dinner there. And then he's like, and then I'm just going to stop at like King Soopers, which is like a grocery store on the way out of town, and get us the tickets. Of course, they were sold out. And he's like, okay, well, we'll just drive up to the gate and get tickets. No, they were sold out too. And so I'm like, well, it's fine. We can just go have a picnic somewhere. We'll find somewhere. And he's like, no, we're not having a picnic on the side of the road. And so we went to this cute little town called Morrison. And it actually couldn't have worked out better because, watching a movie, we would have been sitting watching a movie. But we ended up having a dinner in this cute little town. It was a French restaurant. I think it was called Prague. And we sat for hours. We were chatting, and we shared a bottle of wine. And, we looked up at, hours later, and we were the last people there. The chairs were all going up on the tables. We're like, okay, we better leave. So, yeah, that was our first date. And, it's kind of showing me that my husband is not the most prepared man. And that rings true to this day. But it was like a blessing for then, because we were able to sit and actually get to know each other a little bit on that first date. And that was, it was a great first date. And, we're still here 11 years later.
And so how do you manage your schedule together when you're both racing and training? How do you manage that, you have time for yourselves and time for your training, and that, you might be on a really hard session and he might be on an easy session? How do you coordinate your schedule so that you have what most of us would term a normal daily life?
Well, I think, first of all, we're fortunate that we're both professional athletes. If my partner was, working full time, I think it'd be a lot harder to connect. And also I think it's hard. It's harder for, or at least I feel like it's harder for spouses to understand, I'm going to be out riding my bike all day on Saturday, and then I'm going to be exhausted Sunday afternoon because I'm going to run 30K in the morning. We're both on the same page. And so we're both on the same sort of schedule. And actually earlier in our career, I was sort of shifting my focus to long course and Ironman, and he was still racing ITU and more short course races. So our schedules were a lot different initially, but by about 2012 or 13, maybe it was 2012 or 11 actually, he decided he wanted to race Ironman. So once we both got on the same schedule, that was much better because we were able to plan our years sort of together. Like we wouldn't pick the same races unless they made sense for us. We kind of always trying to pick the best races for ourselves, regardless of the other person. Sometimes it was together. But the great thing was we were able to plan our mid-season break together, and obviously Kona is our big race. So we're both in intense focus training at the same times. And then after Kona, obviously we have time off together. And so the rhythm of the season is the same. So that makes things a lot easier. But yeah, there's some days where he's having a hard day, I'm having an easy day. And actually that's a good thing because I have a little more energy to maybe go get the groceries and cook dinner and clean up. And, on my harder days, maybe he can cook dinner. Actually, he doesn't really like to cook dinner, but he'll do more around the house and help out a little more. So, we kind of like pick each other up. Sometimes we're both just exhausted and we just order DoorDash takeout, but it works out actually really well. And we do have a lot of time together. We do go and start rides together, whether I have intervals or he has intervals. We just kind of warm up together and go do our thing. Sometimes we do long rides together. And when I'm fit, we do our longer runs together as well, and certainly in the off season. So we do get to spend a lot of time training together as well.
Now that you're expecting your second baby, is your training very different to when you were pregnant with Izzy, or are you on the same trajectory as you were on the last time?
The training has been a lot different, because when I fell pregnant with Izzy, it was like 8 weeks after Kona. So I was almost basically at my most unfit I am all year. Probably 6 weeks after Kona. I was around November, we found out we were pregnant with Izzy. So I'd basically just taken time off after Kona and then was just starting to start training again, and then we found out we're pregnant. So I just never got on a real program. I just kind of kept active, did something every day, but never really was training. Whereas this time I was about 8 weeks out from an Ironman, so I was in very good shape. We've tried to keep the fitness for longer. So, I stayed on program through till, the beginning of this month, actually, where I was following a program and doing some intensity, within reason. And training has definitely been tapering off, or, getting less in hours as I've, put on a little bit more weight and getting a little slower and things are getting a bit more uncomfortable. But yeah, I only just went off program. So now I'm kind of doing a similar program, if you want to say, to what I was when I had Izzy, where I just kind of get up and have a rough plan for what I want to do for the week, but there's nothing really set in stone, and I sort of go by feel. And I'll do that for the rest of the pregnancy. I'll try to probably stick around, 10 to 12 hours. But obviously, everything will be guided by how I feel.
And at the height of your peak performance, Rinny, what would a typical week of training look like in either hours or distance across swim, bike, run and strength and conditioning?
I'd probably train between 25 and 30 hours. 30 hours would be a very big week, and probably bigger on the bike. 12 to 15 hours of cycling. I'm probably better at distances. So I probably ride, 350 to 450K on the bike, 80 to 100K of running, and probably 20 to 25K of swimming, and then 2 strength sessions in there as well. So it works out to be roughly 25 to 30 hours. And they're my bigger weeks. I don't do those until probably mid-season, when I'm fit enough to handle that sort of volume and can bounce back from that kind of volume. And, it's really more preparing for an Ironman or Kona, more specifically.
And as you've moved through the sport over the past number of years, especially at the long distance racing, how has your fueling and your rest and recovery changed? Or has it?
I think fueling, I certainly noticed that as I got more efficient at racing at a certain intensity, or at Ironman intensity, I take on a little less calories just because we become more efficient. Certainly in the halves, I noticed that I really didn't need a whole lot of nutrition during the race, until I had Isabel and was breastfeeding, and then I needed a lot. So it's kind of a constantly moving goalpost, to be honest. But yeah, prior to Izzy, I was pretty efficient at that effort for like a half. Ironman's still a little different in that it is so long, you do need to fuel, but maybe not as aggressive as I did when I was first starting doing Ironman.
Has your recovery strategy changed over the years? And your rest? Do you sleep more now than you did 10 years ago?
I've always been a big sleeper. I think I don't sleep as much now as I did because I have a small toddler running around who likes to wake us up at the middle of the night, pretty much every night still. I think as you get older, you don't sweat the small stuff. And so, after I had Izzy, I've had so many minimal sleep nights and was doing training, and I'm like, I don't know how I was doing everything I was doing, because prior to Izzy we'd sleep 8 to 10 hours. I'd take a nap in the daytime. We would rest on the couch if we weren't training, be in the Normatec boots, on the massage table, a whole lot more. I just have a little less time now for recovery, so it is more important because I am getting older. But the one thing I do make sure I do is get that massage once a week, or if I'm in Kona training 25, 30 hours a week, I'm getting 2 massages a week. That has been enough to sustain me But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I used to recover better than I do now because, I get home and I've got a 3-year-old and she wants to play, and somehow she gives us energy too because she's so full of love. And to be in that sort of mindset of, instead of thinking, oh, this is taking energy away from me, I feel like, well, this is fulfilling. It's filling up my cup to be able to spend time with my daughter. And that happiness, I think, bleeds into racing and is shown when you're out there racing. You're doing it because you love it.
And I want to talk about some of the lowlights. Maybe not the lowlights is the wrong word, but I suppose disappointments across, the injuries that you had, we'll say, before Kona, when you were knocked off your bike 3 days before the race. The elbow fracture, was the radius last year. How do you deal with that kind of stuff when it's completely out of your control and there's nothing you can do with it? But how do you pick yourself back up, or what do you do in terms of a mental strategy to get back on the horse, as we would say in Ireland, and push on and push forward with what you need to do and what you need to get done?
You've nailed the 2 setbacks I've ever had in my career, really. I've never had an injury and never had like a chronic illness that's put me out of racing for, at all, really. Maybe I missed a race or 2 throughout my career from falling ill before the race. And again, that comes down to really good coaching and management and having a good team around me, but also listening to my body. And so, yeah, like when I did have that, accident 3 days before Kona where I was knocked off my bike, I kind of just tried to brush it off and continue on. And, in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going to be fine, but my body wasn't really fine. And I wasn't able to finish the race because my back was just a bit of a mess after the crash. But I think you move past that and you do have a grieving period and period where you're disappointed and upset that, things didn't go to plan. But I try to look at the positives. Well, 2015 was, I guess, my 6th chance at racing Kona, and the previous 5 I'd won 3 of them, been on the podium 2 of them, so I got a second, a third, and 3 firsts. So I try to look at, well, I've had such an amazing run, and this just wasn't my year, just wasn't meant to be. And so I think when you just start thinking of being grateful for what you do have instead of focusing on the one bad performance or the 1 year you couldn't execute the race that you planned or set out to or trained for, then you can put a positive mind spin on it. And then, you go into the next year and like, okay, well, that happened. It's behind me now. All I can do is focus on the next goal.
For somebody starting out in the sport, what pieces of advice would you give them, and especially women that maybe are considering stepping up from a short distance to long distance racing?
Well, first of all, well done for not just going straight for the long distance. I think there are a lot of athletes that say, see Ironman and say, I just want to go and do an Ironman, and they bypass the short course races. And I think that's a massive mistake. I think people who approach triathlon and Ironman should try and race the short course races first. I think it just gives you more joy when you do get up to the Ironman and you know what you're in for, basically. Other than that, I think my best advice is to get a good team around you, find a coach that you trust and who believes in you. And also training partners are invaluable. If you can have some great training partners that can help push you and be positive around you, I think that's really helpful. And it just makes the journey a lot more fun, especially if you have a teammate that's, doing their first as well. And that makes the whole journey a little bit more fulfilling and enjoyable.
And then when we look at new mums, or maybe mums that are looking to take up triathlon, what advice would you give to those ladies who are looking to take up the sport, or maybe to step up in distance after having a baby?
I think after you have a baby, I was certainly felt like I was racing some of my best ever. I think you're mentally stronger than you'll ever be. I think there's, definitely some baby hormones in there that can help you along. But yeah, I mean, time management becomes an issue, and figuring out, how to make sure you're giving your husband and child everything they need, but then, taking that time for yourself to fulfill a dream or goal, which, whatever that may be. So just make sure you have some good support around, whether that's an in-law or a great nanny or a great a babysitter that you know and trust and loves your kids, that you feel comfortable leaving your little one in their care. Yeah, that's my biggest advice.
I'm going to go to a rapid fire round now, Rinny. This is something that we started just this week. We announced obviously yesterday that you were coming on the show, so we asked people to submit some of their questions. So I've picked some of them for you for a rapid fire round. So John Stapleton wants to know, what sort of run training do you do?
I do probably one longer aerobic run a week that's easy. I do one pretty high intensity training session, which is probably 10K race pace. I'd probably run about 15K, 10 to 15K at that race pace. And then I do one build run. So it starts out sort of slow and finishes pretty hard. And that's about 20K. And the rest of my running's more, off the bike just to get my legs under me. I run 6 days a week. I always take one day off. One day a week I'll run twice in the day. So it's probably 7 run sessions a week.
Do you recover faster after your bike sessions or your run sessions?
Bike sessions. Yeah, run sessions definitely take a little bit more out of you, especially the high intensity ones and the long ones.
Oliver Harkin says, Rinny has a history of winning world championships, coming from sometimes well behind on the run, amazing runner. Was there any championships where you thought that's too big of a gap, but you won and it even surprised you? And also, what do you think Lucy Charles needs to do to become the world champion? So 2 questions from Oliver for you.
The obvious answer for that one is 2014 when I was 14 and a half minutes down on Daniela and getting off the bike. I didn't think that the win was, in the cards for me that day. But, then I mentioned earlier, I decided to just do the best I could, and it ended up with a 3rd world title that day. So that's definitely the most memorable race, where I was a long way down off the bike. At the beginning, didn't think I'd get to the front, but I did in the end. And Lucy Charles, I think Lucy Charles just needs to keep doing what she's doing. She is so close. She just has to keep turning up. She's right there. She's right where she needs to be. Just little bits of improvement every year. And she'll look back after she's won a couple of world titles. I mean, I know it's probably frustrating for her now, but she'll look back and realize how great these years have been for her. Because when you're right there and you can taste it, it just pushes you and drives you so hard, and it brings out the best athlete in you. And she's just a phenomenal talent.
From Instagram, Jennifer Sophie asks, if you could go back to your first ever Ironman race and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
My first Ironman race was actually Kona, almost a decade after my first triathlon. So I was very well prepared. But one thing I would tell myself would be to push a little harder or trust in your training, because I was very cautious on the bike that year. I swam very well, but on the bike I was so worried about the marathon and just making the distance that I didn't push as hard as I maybe could have on the bike. But hindsight's 2020, and through my years of racing I learned a lot.
So before Kona in 2009, had you ever run a marathon even?
No.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was like 2 unknowns. First ever marathon off the bike and on the biggest stage in the sport. So it was a big ask, but I had prepared very well and took my time to make sure I could compete on that day. But I was still very fearful of the distance.
You don't do things by halves?
No. All in.
All in or nothing. Aoife O'Connor asks, do you ever get mammy guilt for training? And has having Izzy changed your training? Do you find it hard to divide yourself and cope with the responsibilities as a mum as well as your responsibilities as an athlete? Yeah,
absolutely. When I initially had Izzy, I didn't want to leave her. I didn't want to spend a second away from her, but you kind of realize that I still had passion for racing and still was calling me to do that. So I had to sort of separate parenting from this is my job and my profession. Yes, it's my passion and my love as well. But there were many times you just don't want to leave. You've got a beautiful little baby who just wants to spend time with you. And especially when they get a little bit older, they're like, Mommy, don't go. Stay with me. It's really hard to go. And actually, she's forced me to dial back my training just a little bit. So a lot of the fluff that I maybe would have done before, like the little extra sessions that I would add in and do like an extra little 30-minute jog here, or I don't have time for that. So it's like, okay, I go and get my training done. There's no messing around. And then it's Izzy time. So yeah, like you definitely, I don't think you can avoid having a little bit of guilt when you have a little one at home. But I'm hoping to show her that I am a strong woman, goals and dreams, and I can do that and also be everything to her as well.
And speaking of Izzy, Deirdre Kelly in Galway wants to know, do you want Izzy to be a triathlete? And she says, I love Izzy.
Little Izzy, yeah, she's a star of the show. I want Izzy to do whatever she loves. Honestly, like we're trying to we'll try and expose her to a bunch of different sports. I'd love her to be involved in sports for sure. I'd love her to, start with a team sport, but also, we'll put her in swimming. But yeah, we'll let her dictate what she wants to do. And, she already, I want to go riding with mummy. I want to run with mummy. I'm going to run with you today, mummy. And so she'll start a lot of my runs and do the first couple of 100 meters. And then I have to say goodbye to her and continue on. But much to her disgust, because she wants to do the whole run. I mean, monkey see, monkey do, right? Like, she sees what we do. She wants to go and do that, like mummy and daddy too. But I want to expose her to a bunch of different sports. And I don't really want her to be a triathlete because I don't really want her riding on the roads. But if that's something that she wants to do and she loves, then of course we'll support her.
And of course we did see on your Instagram just at the weekend, Izzy was in the gym with you and she was trying to copy the session. Yeah. So very cute, very involved as well.
Oh, yeah. I take her to my Friday morning gym sessions with our strength coach, Erin, and yeah, she wants to do all the same things. So that Erin's like always setting up like, okay, well, here's mummy's weights and here's like Izzy's little, like something that looks like what I'm picking up that she can actually pick up. And yeah, she very proudly stands beside me and tries to mimic my exercises.
And we saw on the Tim and Rinny show with Izzy recently where you had done the big reveal about the pregnancy. And at the end, then we saw Izzy was saying, Daddy, I'm going out on my bike. Now you bring me out my shoes and I'll forget them, and bring me out my helmet and I'll forget them. Just so cute. Esther Carpati asks, what is your mantra to get through struggles you may have?
Mantra has been, throughout my triathlon career, if it is to be, it's up to me. And that one I actually came from a basketball coach way back when I was 12 or 13 years old, and really just resonated with me. I think, a lot of the times people are waiting for help from other people, or, I deserve this, or you should help me do this. And I just kind of took that and ran, and believe that if you want something in life, no one's going to want it as much as you want it for yourself. And so if you want something in life, then you should go out and just take it by both hands with all your might. So that's kind of how I approach my triathlon career, and kind of the mantra that I carry with me.
And Shannon Kelly asks, at what stage during your sporting endeavours did you think you could do this for a living?
I think probably, I wasn't really doing it for a living until I won my first world title. I mean, I was scraping by until then, which was 2007. But I sort of started believing around 2002. I finished second in the under-23 World Championships, the ITU race in Cancun. And that really showed me that, okay, I could be actually really good at this sport. And that was kind of my first glimpse of, okay, maybe I can do this professionally and make a living. But again, you still check yourself, because for a few more years I was barely scraping by and racing from race to race to eat and pay rent. And it wasn't until I kind of really got in the big stage and won a world title that I was like, okay, I'm actually making money that I can put away. And I'm not comfortable by any means, but I'm good.
I have two more questions for you, Rinny. As an inspiration to many of us around the world, when you started out in the sport, who was your inspiration or the role model that you looked up to?
Loretta Harrop. She's a professional female triathlete from Australia. 1999, she won the ITU World Championships. 2000, she got fifth in the Olympics, but she had, had an injury. And then in Athens in 2004, she got the silver medal. It was actually a heartbreaking rundown by Kate Allen, who actually is Australian, but was racing for Austria because her husband was Austrian. But what I loved about her was just her tenacity and her strength and her toughness. When she was in Australia, she was trained all around the world and spent a lot of time in Europe because of the ITU season. But when she was in Australia, she trained out of our centre. And so I got to sort of observe her work ethic. She let us do a couple of training sessions with her when I was just starting out. And she was just incredible. So tough.
Now, I know you've raced over this side of the world before, but have you any plans to come over and any plans to come to Ireland?
We would love to come to Ireland. O'Donnell is a, Irish name. And, we would love to get out there and visit. We don't have any immediate plans. Obviously no plans right now because we can't travel. But at some point, I don't know if it'll be for a race. We don't love cold races. But we'd love to get out there and visit. I know Tim's parents also would love to go out there as well. So probably it'd be a family visit holiday more than a race.
Well, we can always arrange a meet and greet in Galway for you and bring you out to Salthill for a swim. It was 15.5 degrees Celsius in the water this morning for our swim, so it was lovely and wild.
Yeah, that sounds quite cold. Doable, but yes, very cold.
Rinny, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege talking to you. And I really do hope to see you in Kona in 2021 and wish you the very best of luck with the rest of your pregnancy. And big hello to Tim and Izzy, and keep up the amazing stuff that you're doing and keep inspiring the rest of us to keep pushing forward. Thank you so much.
No worries. I appreciate it, Joanne.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was such a privilege and an honour to chat with the 3-time Ironman World Champion, Mirinda Carfrae. Don't forget, you can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. That's try with an I, not a Y. I'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on our new Instagram page @trytalkingsport. Pop by and say hi and let me know what you think of the show. If you are new to Try Talking Sport, please do check out some of our previous episodes. You will be both impressed and inspired by our guests. Until next time, wash your hands, stay safe, and thanks as always for tuning in.